Okay, welcome back to Morgan Rodsmiths. I'm Ric Plante. I'm the bamboo rod maker here at the shop. In our last video, we roughed our strips on the hand mill. So I've just put our finished butt anvil on. I've set my taper. Now we're going to get into cutting our strips down to a stage that we call dry binding, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, we roughed our strips to about 100 thousandths over final size. Our next step is we're going to cut them down to about 35 to 40 thousandths over size. We're going to do a dry bind just to check for any imperfections, and then we can address those as we see them. These strips have been soaking since this morning, probably about 5 hours, I think. We do soak our strips here. We find no ill effects to soaking strips. One thing about bamboo is it soaks up water very slowly and it dries out very quickly. So you'll see as I get through this, by the time I get to the size I want, the shavings will actually be dry. The water will not have soaked in that far. First thing I need to do is I have to find where I am, because my rough anvil was taller than my finished butt anvil. I've used this a number of times. I've trued it so it's slightly smaller. So I've mounted my strips. We mounted on station A. Our stop is on the corresponding station A. First thing I'm going to do is just take a look. I'm going to go down till my cutters are fairly close to the bamboo. I'm going to take a pass just to kind of feel where I am. I can see right there, you can see I'm cutting just a little bit. So now I know approximately where I am. This particular rod that I'm making, I want to leave it, like I said, 35 to 40 thousandths over at station 8. So that's where I'm going to do my measuring. I can measure at multiple stations, 12, 10, 8, whatever you like. We tend to measure a lot at station 8. Usually it falls approximately in the middle of the rod. So to get down to that number I want, I'm going to have to work my way down. Right? This has been soaking, like I said, for about 5 hours, so I can take a fairly heavy cut. This is about 8 thousandths. And it cuts very easy, as you can see, because I've been soaking. I want to show you again, I know I've mentioned it, but make sure that you have the correct motion. The motion when cutting is forward first and then down. So I keep the hand mill in front of me and I walk all the way through. Heel down, toe, move my dial, take a pass. Another thing to notice as I'm doing this is where I put my left hand. I put it here. It's not a good idea to put it on top of the dial because you could arbitrarily move that as you're cutting your strip. So I put my hand right here in the middle of the hand mill. Taking a nice even cut. I think I'll take a couple more passes and then I'll take a measurement to get an idea where I am and about how much more I need to go down. First thing I need to do when I take a measurement is I have my measuring block. And the measuring block measures the 3 sides. But we want to make sure that we're getting a clean measurement. So I'm going to scrape the apex or the top of my bamboo. Make sure that there's no little debris or anything that can get in the way of my measurement. Right now I'm sitting at 170. I know I want to get down to 160. So at this point, I can start to roll my stop up. I can move my dial down. That's 10 thousandths. I'm going to go a little shy because I don't want to go over that. I'm going to roll my stop up and I'm going to lock it in place. This ensures me that I'm going to be close, but I'm going to still be slightly high. A couple more passes, we'll take another measurement. I'm starting to hit my stop now, so you can see I'm going to right down to it. Take the pass. When I hit my stop, I always like to take a couple passes just to make sure that I have a nice clean cut to measure. So again, I'm going to scrape the apex, take a measurement. I'm sitting at 165, so I have 5 thousandths to go down. What I'm going to do is just loosen my stop, and I'm just going to kind of inch my way down that last 5 thousandths. Okay, I'm at my stop. One pass. Take one more just to make sure we're getting a nice clean measurement. Scrape the apex. And we're looking for 160. And there it is. Okay, so let me show you what I mean about the apex. You have your two cutters here, as you can see. And in between the two cutters, there's the smallest little gap. Everything has a tolerance, so we cannot get those two cutters actually touching because the manufacturer of these carbide cutters has a tolerance, so we have to make sure we leave enough room. But that little gap right there leaves you what we call the chimney on your strips. And I'll show you what I mean in the drawing. So here's what I mean by the chimney on your strip. If you look at your strip, this is the enamel side. This is the side that is down on the anvil. And these are the two sides that you're cutting. And that little gap between the two cutters, right, leaves a little bit of a chimney. You can see with the measuring block that the measuring block is going to measure your three sides here. But if you have this chimney and it gets in the way, you can get a misreading. So what I do with the razor blade is I scrape that chimney off like so, and that allows me to get an accurate measurement with my measuring block when I'm measuring my strips. Okay, so before I dry bind my strips together, I have to sand the apex. Again, I just went over on that little chimney that could exist. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take a sanding block, and this is simply 150 grit. I'm just going to go over, sand the apex, make sure that I have that chimney off, so when I do bind them together, that they come together nice and neat. There's no little splinters or slivers or any debris that could get in the way and cause me a glue seam, or give me the idea that there's a glue seam when really it could just be a little piece of bamboo that got caught between the flats. When I get out to the end of my strips, I always want to go in one direction. We've had some people in class, they go and they come back and they can catch their strip and actually snap their strip off. So I think it's very important when you get to about the last quarter, maybe the last third, you're going in one direction. Make sure you get that apex nice and clean. I can feel it, I can run my fingers over it. I have a nice little flat on there, no little burrs. So I'm gonna sit here and I'm just gonna do that to these 6 strips, and then we'll get ready to bind them together. Okay, so I need to set my strips up so I can bind them. I simply put a couple pieces of tape on my workbench. And I'm sure there's other ways to do this. This is just how I do it. Another thing I like to do at this stage is I like to number my strips 1 through 6. The reason for that is At this point going forward, I want to keep them in the same order as they are when I bind them. So they're color coded, as you can see, just to make sure that I have my node spacing correct. I'm going to lay them out on my tape, numbering them 1 through 6. Okay, so I need to get these rolled together. I'm going to cut my tape. Be careful not to cut your bamboo. Leave a small little gap in between the strips. That's going to allow them to roll together. If I get too close like this, they'll bind and they won't roll together very well. So I want to leave a small little gap. Next thing I want to make sure I do is I want to make sure that I'm lining up all of my holes, because that hole down is what makes every strip the exact same taper, right? Because they're all anchored in the same spot. So again, I'm leaving the smallest gap in between so the strips will roll together. You can see I got my holes lined up, a little gap in between. Right, next what I'm going to do is cut my tape on one side very close, and I'm going to leave extra. Now here is the key. I want to get this side of this strip to this side of this strip. A lot of people want to make sure that each one rolls together. But if I get this side and I go all the way over to the far side, you can see they roll together very easy. Okay, so I brought the strips over to our binder. And again, this is the binder that we use at Morgan Rodsmiths. It's a very old design. Tom had one similar at Winston when he owned Winston. When he started Morgan Rodsmiths, he just had another one made. There are a lot of binders out there on the market. There's also plans on the internet if you wanted to make your own. It's actually a pretty simple process. We've used this binder for over 20 years and it works great for us. So let me show you how it works. Dry belt is going to go over the bamboo. We take our binding cord, pull out a little excess, go behind the bamboo. We're going to put some half hitches in just to lock the binding cord in place. We're going to cut off the excess. Dry belt goes around again, and off we go. So at this point, my strips are about 35 to 40 thousandths oversized. I have dry bound them. I bound them using no glue. And now what I want to do is I want to go and I want to take a look at each strip for any imperfections or any potential glue seams I may have. And I'm going to mark them with a pencil, and I'll show you how we address those here. The difference between a good rod and a great rod is your attention to detail. So I use these, what we call cheaters, so I can really see if I'm going to have any glue seams that I need to deal with. What I'm going to do is just go down each flat, and again, the majority of the time, 98-99% of the time, any imperfection is going to be at a node. But that doesn't mean you should not check the entire strip, because it could have an imperfection somewhere else. So what I'm going to do here is just go down the flat. I'm going to look, in any place I see an imperfection, I'm just going to mark it with my pencil. I put a little arrow in the direction of the imperfection, and then I'll show you how we address that. Go for it. Okay, so you can see here as I look at this node, there's no gap on this side, but there's a pretty good gap on this side. So again, I'm going to take with my pencil, and it's important that you use a pencil and not a felt pen or a Sharpie where the ink can actually go into the bamboo. So I'm going to put a little arrow where the gap starts and where it ends, so I can see in the direction I need to address that side. You can see there's a slight gap here as well. So on this one, I'm going to address both sides of that node. Okay, so there's a couple ways to address those little cutouts on the nodes. One is you can see here in the hold down shoe that this hole is slotted. That allows me to loosen this screw and slide the shoe one way or the other. So if I have an imperfection, I can simply loosen the screw, slide my shoe over, and that way it'll force the cutters to cut straight through that little divot that you might have. So this is how I address the potential glue seams that I could have at a node. I have this sanding jig here. It's got multiple slots in it, and they're just 60-degree slots to match the 60 degrees that I'm cutting my strips. All I'm going to do is put my strip in. I can see the direction of the arrows, so I can turn my strip where the arrow was pointing with the sanding block, long, even strokes. And what that's going to do is take that little potential glue seam and elongate it, because the hand mill is going to want to follow the bamboo. So by elongating it, it ends up cutting out the little divot that was there that could possibly give me a potential glue seam. So on this particular node, you can see I had arrows pointing in each direction. I can just sand, long even strokes, don't dig in, long even strokes, both sides. Another reason I like to use this jig, because at this point now, I can feel my node. If it's proud or has any imperfections, I can simply just very easily hit it with my sanding block, make sure it's nice and smooth, right? And there you go, that's perfect. Okay, so today we cut our strips down to about 35 to 40 thousandths over. Took them off, we sanded the apex, we did a dry bind, no glue, bound them up, looked for any imperfections through the binding, addressed it with our little sanding jig. Also, you can move the shoe. We showed you how to do that on the hand mill if you decide to do that. So 2 ways to address those issues. Again, what makes a good rod to a great rod is that attention to detail that the builder makes on those little steps all along the way. On the next video, we will cut to final size, we will hollow, and we'll glue the strips.